Welcome to the Conversations with Chuck Hester weekly podcast. It's designed to inform, entertain, and introduce you to some really interesting and inspiring people. Today's episode is brought to you by Vidyard, the video platform for business. I'm your host, Chuck Hester. And here we are. Now, my guest today is Leslie August, founder of the Leslie August Corporation. Leslie started her firm out of a unique experience related to workplace bullying. She witnessed and experienced firsthand workplace bullying as a business owner, manager, bystander, and target. This changed the direction of her life and was the genesis of her business. By aligning her insurance background and bullying experience with the movement towards civility in the workplace, Leslie has developed a system that reduces legal and HR costs and increases productivity. I can attest to Leslie's amazing intelligence and dedication to making the workplace a better place for all employees. She is a true advocate and a great friend. Welcome, Leslie August.
Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, it's morning for you because you're on the West Coast. Absolutely.
I am on the West Coast. How are you this morning?
I'm very good. Absolutely. I'm as I've said in past, and full disclosure, Leslie is a client and a good friend. But I always like to say when I have a chance to talk to her, then my day gets better. So having 45 full minutes with you, it makes my day really, really good. So I appreciate the time you're taking today to talk about what you've got going on and where it is. And Leslie, in the introduction, I mentioned the fact that you've been not only a witness, but you've actually been part of the bullying issues that run into the workplace. Talk to me a little bit about your background. Tell our listeners where you come from and that, and then why that informed you to do what you're doing today.
Of course. So I had a very unique experience in a company that I had worked at for a very, very long time. And the story goes that we hired somebody unbeknownst to us who ended up being a bully. And it wasn't the type of in-your-face bully that you think about, in the schoolyard. It was the more subtle divide and conquer, set people against each other, talk behind their backs, gossiping, all that sort of more subtle, divisive, and negative toxicity in the workplace. So I was brought in to actually help deal with and sort of surgically remove this person from the workplace without triggering some sort of big legal action against the company. And in the process, I ended up being the target of the board of directors. So I fixed the problem, but it was a little more complicated because the bully had an enabler who was one of my partners, and they didn't like the fact that I thought that from the top down, we needed to change our procedures and policies around civility, workplace bullying, and the command and control philosophy that existed at the company.
So talk to me about, because there is a lot more awareness, and we're so happy to see that, for diversity, inclusion, discrimination, and like. What's the difference between discrimination and workplace bullying?
Well, the main difference is that while workplace bullying can include discrimination, can include harassment and discrimination are legally prohibited. So those are illegal actions that need to be, those laws need to be complied with within your organization. There is no law against workplace bullying except in the territory of Puerto Rico right now. So they were the first ones to put legislation in any of the U.S. states or territories. And so if you're not in a protected class, or if you're being abused by a workplace bully and you're not in a protected class, you really have no legal recourse.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So if I'm a owner of a company, a manager of a company, whatever it may be, why is it important for me to have an anti-bullying policy and procedure in my organization if it's not illegal?
Well, that's a great question. That's a great question. So we do some things in organizations for the betterment of the organization and the bottom line, that are not necessarily driven by compliance with the law. And my position, having seen it firsthand, is that you will potentially inadvertently allow certain types of behavior that within your organization that then reduce employee engagement, reduce productivity and efficiencies, and ultimately impact your bottom line. Now, I could give you even just a specific example. If you've got somebody in the organization who is bullying one or more people in the organization, usually it's a target is one at a time. Somebody's targeted one at a time. That then starts to result in an increased number of complaints to HR, because it's not just the target that makes a complaint necessarily, it's also the bystanders who are being impacted. So now HR has a bigger workload. And now maybe you have to add another person because HR has to deal with these complaints. And it's not clear, it hasn't been identified that there's a person that's at the root of the problem, and that person needs to be dealt with in a specific way that's different from the way you would deal with a normal conflict in the workplace.
Definitely. So, we're all about, as a MacGyver of Marcom, we're all about marketing communications and internal communications and understanding that. So what are some of the communication strategies in regards to anti-bullying in the workplace and how to address those?
So I think the most basic one is you need to have in your onboarding process, you need to communicate to people that that kind of behavior is not acceptable, that we don't do that here. One example could be, and I've heard companies do this, they have a no gossip policy. So if you start talking about somebody else behind their back to a coworker, it's important for that coworker to say, I'm not comfortable with this. It's we obviously have this no gossip policy. Can we change the subject? So that's a simple communication tool. I mean, even if there isn't a no gossip policy, that's a really good way to stay away from gossiping about people, which then creates exclusion and ostracism. Anything that then potentially has somebody feel like they're not part of the group.
Yeah. And I mean, I would imagine that to a certain extent, there are blatant folks out there, and I was in corporate for a long time, as you have been as well. There are blatant people out there who specifically target people and do it, very blatantly. But are you finding in your experience, are there also folks who are doing it and not necessarily knowing that, what they're doing is harmful?
There are a certain number of people, and I would almost say that they don't fall into the bully category, the true bully category. There are a certain number of people who just are in an environment where they're encouraged to use the command and control style of management. And they don't realize that what they're doing is, by instilling fear in people, they're creating an environment where people are not going to come to them with new ideas. They're not going to risk that. They're not going to open up in a meeting and maybe criticize or give feedback on a bad idea that could save the company money by not doing it. They're just going to sit back and let things happen, and because it's too risky to say something. Now, that command and control style manager can be trained.
Leslie, let me stop you a second. Define command and control manager for those who may not know what that means.
So that is somebody who believes that the most effective way to get things done and to achieve corporate objectives is to assign the work and make sure that the work gets done, no questions asked. I'm the final word. And if you want to do it a different way, or if you see an efficiency that I don't see, that's too bad. Because this is all about me and my agenda. So it's not a collaborative give and take. It's where the hierarchy is valued and the inequities in the power structure give a lot of control to those who manage people.
Interesting. Very interesting to that. So we're going on 10 months in COVID. And this is typical. I mean, you and I have never met and probably won't for a while until I get to Northern California. But we've had a relationship for close to 5 months. And, so talk to me somewhat about how do you handle anti-bullying in the age of COVID, lack of a better way to put this, and what I call the new reality. There's no such thing as nothing's normal anymore.
Right.
So, we're on Zoom calls on a daily basis. I know you and I, for instance, are on probably 5 to 6 times a day. Typical for an employee, maybe 3 times a day or something like that. But talk to me about how COVID has affected anti-bullying in particular, and is it still prevalent as a result of, even though I'm on a Zoom call?
Interesting, because initially managers thought that there would be, and even the employees and the targets thought that, oh, what a relief. I don't have to go in and face this negative person, or I don't have to face this difficult situation or this person that I have conflict with. And there is, to some extent, that relief. In some situations, it is better because the target, if they've really been suffering in a situation, they don't see that person face to face, which can re-trigger some of the issues that they may have, especially health harming issues. But the reality is that it's a very stressful time, even though we're on these Zoom calls and we're not seeing each other in person. And so managers who had poor communication skills or poor management skills before are not any better now. In fact, they may be worse. So you get, there's instances of actually yelling and demanding bullying behavior in Zoom meetings that I've heard about recently from somebody who works for a organization in the Bay Area. And there's a lot of really nasty email bullying and text bullying that goes on.
And to a certain extent, and you're the expert, I'm not, but I would imagine that there may be some folks who feel emboldened to a certain extent, and that they aren't talking to them face to face. Okay, so it's a text, it's an email, whatever it may be, or it's comments in a Zoom call, because they may be more emboldened to do that type of thing. And the other thing that you mentioned, and we've talked about this organization, but there's an organization called Same Here that works on what we're going through, and every single person that I've talked to is under stress and is under the lack of what are we doing in 2021 and where are we. I just recently did a poll that said, okay, you got 20 days in December. Are you going to crush it, or are you just going to scoot through to 2021 and hope for the best? And several people said, I can't wait for 2021 to start over again. And that's so there's a lot of issues that we run into as far as that goes. So I can totally understand that. And Leslie, here I want to take a second and make sure that the folks that are watching, and there are because I'm getting comments. I can see your comments. I can't comment back, but what we can do is we can add that information in, and we can also comment on the replay as well. So just so you know. And that being said, and it kind of dovetails into a topic area that I was going to bring up anyway. But we've got one of our viewers here says, I don't think employers realize when a high performer quits or is forced to quit, how much it will cost them, sometimes 1.5 to 2 more times to replace that veteran employee. It's a measurable cost for the company and very preventable. So
Yes,
talk to me about the high performer that says, I know several. Screw it, I'm done. I'm not putting up with it. And the other question on top of that is, does COVID, because you're working at home, does that embolden you to go and say, I'm going to try something else?
Okay, so the first piece, and I just, your viewer is absolutely 100% correct that not only do the complaints cost the company money to deal with and handle and potentially become lawsuits, but the cost of the turnover is probably the biggest cost associated with dealing with a toxic workplace, because your best people don't need to stay there. Usually they can find another job. Mm-hmm. And so it costs, the average we use is 1.5 times the high performer's salary to replace them. And in the meantime, you don't have that high performer's production. Mm. You don't have you're bringing somebody else in, they've got to be brought up to speed. You've got an onboarding process, you've got a learning curve. And so it's a huge cost to have to deal with that turnover. And then what, do you even find somebody who's an equivalent? Right? So that's a big piece. Now, whether or not people just pick up and go, I think during COVID, that's tough. I think people may be putting up with more than they would, because unless you're a very unique talent that can just pick up and go somewhere else and there's a job there for you, a lot of hiring freezes are going on. There's a lot of companies that just aren't hiring anybody. Now, if they have a loss of, that might be an opportunity to make a change. But I think a lot of people are just holding on to what they have. Sort of the devil that you know versus the devil you don't know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It totally makes sense on that. And we talked about the fact that, the Leslie August Corporation was formed in order to help companies not just combat this, but also talk about minimizing the cost of the workplace. And what kind of strategies are you using with your clients on how to help them do that? And what are the costs? I mean, maybe we start there. What are the costs of bullying in the workplace for an organization?
So the costs are going to be the cost of turnover, the cost of absenteeism. So you're going to have a certain number of people who just not only take all their PTO, their paid time off, but they may take unpaid time off because of what they're suffering from in the workplace. You're going to have the state of, it's kind of counterintuitive, but of presenteeism, which is the person who's afraid to take time off. So they never use their PTO unless they're absolutely forced to. And even if they're taking time off, they're working from, they're working on their off hours because they're always home now, because they're afraid that either somebody's going to be doing something behind their back that they're not going to know about that's going to affect their job or their performance, or they're afraid that they're going to get chastised for not coming into work every day. So there's the cost, and then that person is present but not engaged.
They're showing up just to do the job, and lack of a better way, the old term of punch the clock, right?
Yeah, punch the clock.
Punch the clock and go from there. So
right.
And I'm running into that with my clients as well. I mean, I'm working with old school execs, no pun intended there, that are basically trying to understand the Zoom culture, lack of a better way to put this, on how do you interact with employees on Zoom. But not only that, if they're working from home, I mean, I've got colleagues that work from 8 o'clock in the morning until noon. They stopped and they start working again from 3 to 5 or 7 or whatever it may be, and they still get the work done. The 9 to 5er old school execs go, well, wait a second, how come you're not available at 11 a.m.? Well, because I'm homeschooling my kid right now, and that's part of the deal. as far as that goes. So it's interesting to hear the phrase showing up for work, when showing up for work means you're going to show up on that Zoom call.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of the bottom line on that. So there you go.
So Chuck, some other
please.
costs would be the cost of arbitration if there's a union involved and there's a contract involved. So you might have some arbitration costs involved. The management cost to deal with things like arbitration. If the employer is concerned that the employee who's complaining or who's the target might initiate a lawsuit, that employer is already preparing for defense. So it may never get there, but the cost of preparing for that defense comes into the picture. So, all those legal costs involved. Then you've got the cost of workers' compensation claims, disability claims, and if the employer is resisting or contesting those claims, they often will hire a private investigator to follow the target around for a week and find out if they're really disabled or if they really deserve workers' compensation.
Yeah. So it piles on. So let's get specific with talk to me about how you interact. Because one of the things that I love about you and obviously the folks that I deal with, and you're on my uplifters list on Fridays, is that you're a pay it forward advocate, and you are concerned not just with how can I save corporations money and make sure that the anti-bullying doesn't happen, but also are you a target and can I help you in that regard? As far as that goes. So how do you work with corporations, first of all, and then how do you interact with potential targets?
So with corporations, we have a couple different programs that we do. It depends upon, what they're looking for. But for instance, with HR, I have a 4-phase system that educates them about bullying in the workplace to start with. We don't even go to policies and procedures. We educate them about health harming effects, about how they can become equipped to deal with this phenomenon if they come across it, how they can become a resource, and how they can be involved in outreach to employees if maybe there hasn't been a complaint, but they suspect something, because HR is usually pretty tuned into what's going on depending upon the size of the company. So we go in with purely an educational piece about this phenomenon, because since it's not illegal, it's not usually covered in a lot of trainings, or if it is, it's very minuscule. You don't get a lot of education about it. And it's different from other types of workplace misbehavior.
And are you finding that executives and HR folks in general don't even necessarily recognize that this is an issue, or they don't know how to categorize it, I guess would be the best way to put that?
There are a certain percentage that don't really think it exists because they don't want to believe it happens in their company. And when they start to hear what somebody might be doing within their organization, they don't believe it, not because they're unrealistic. They don't believe it because the perpetrator, the bully, usually is really good at what I call the upward or the lateral communication. They prime the pump, let's say, with their superior or whoever their mentor sponsor is within the organization. So they look great. This is like, and super boss says, I can't believe that Joe would do that. We have such fun playing golf. Or
he gets his work done, and he's productive, right? So
supposedly, right? But they may not be as productive or as effective as their mentor, their sponsor thinks they are. They're very, very good at painting a picture of who they are and what they do. But if you were to ask the people that work for them, whole different story. Often they take credit for other people's work.
Yeah, you're stirring up memories, that's for sure. Slightly off the wall question, and then I want to kind of take a left turn a little bit, and we talked about that prior to starting. But is workplace bullying generational? Does it affect more, or are there more bullies that are baby boomers versus millennials versus Z's, or is that not something that is even a concern?
We don't have really the accurate data on the generational differences. What I can say anecdotally is that I believe, and I think it's pretty common thought within people that are studying the topic, that the generations after the baby boomers, starting with millennials, are less likely to tolerate it and more likely to speak up on behalf of somebody who they see being bullied. Or if they can't, like let's say they don't want to risk their job, right? They're more likely to talk to someone who's being bullied, take them aside and say, I saw what happened over there. I'm really sorry that you got treated like that. And that helps, believe it or not. That really helps to know that you're not alone, to know that other people at least see what's happening and are sympathetic.
Yeah, because your worst enemy sometimes is yourself, and you don't really, you think that it's only you and nobody else is having that problem.
Right.
And that there's no support within the organization. I think that's another big aspect of that as far as what that goes. Now, the left turn that I promise you is not slightly a left turn, because this Conversations with Chuck Hester podcast is all about marketing, communications, social media, and paying it forward. And issues like this, and quite frankly, communication is a big aspect of what you do and how you work with your corporations and and the targets as well. So talk to me. And I know this answer, but I'm kind of throwing you a softball. So talk to me about how you're using social media to build your brand, and what you like about it, what you don't like about it, and some of your wins in that regard.
So I knew before I started my business, but it was untested, that LinkedIn was going to be my primary social media outlet, because what I have is a B2B service. So it just makes a lot more sense. And I do use Twitter, and I use Facebook, and I've started to use Instagram a little bit, but because I'm small and getting started and gaining some traction here, I've put pretty much all my eggs in the LinkedIn basket. And what I found is that it's very, very effective and easy to do the networking that we used to do in person, but now do it using the LinkedIn tools and making those connections, and potentially even getting customers. The other thing I've used it for very effectively is by adding on that sales navigator piece, which I think you recommended to me. Because of the enhanced filtering features. I was really able to narrow down an ideal target audience, no pun intended, of people who I wanted to interview for research purposes on workplace bullying and insurance, employment practices, liability insurance specifically. So it's very effective for that. Does that answer your question?
No, absolutely. And I told you it was a softball and self-serving to a certain extent. But when I work with my clients and talk to them about how to use LinkedIn effectively, I talk to them about Sales Navigator. And there's three folks who need to be doing that. That's the HR folks, that's the business development folks, and that's the job seeker, executive level job seekers. As far as that goes, it's $20 a month more than it is for the basic premium that you get. But it works very, very well. And your brand and what you've been able to do over the last several months has significantly elevated. And I'm sure part of that too is the number of podcasts that you've been on. And they're all of a sudden, as we mentioned, and if you look for Leslie, you'll start seeing this podcast, that podcast. There's 3 or 4 in a row that are going to come up, and that's the nature. This is a little different. That's the nature of most podcasts, is they are recorded ahead of time, and then they're broadcast out. So we're seeing a lot of really cool stuff coming from Leslie August. Can't argue with that. Definitely, for sure. So
Chuck, let me mention one other thing. In a way, I've really used LinkedIn very effectively, is that I am, in addition to doing my workplace bullying advocacy and work with companies and individuals, I'm also in an investment mode where I'm targeting potential acquisitions. And specifically right now, I'm looking at HR consulting firms. Well, one way to do that is to search for those companies on LinkedIn and the principals, the founders, the owners of those companies, and use that as a tool to find companies to approach who might be potential acquisitions. So that's another great way to use LinkedIn if you want to expand your business through acquisition.
Excellent. And we're gonna bring it full circle here. One last comment from one of our listeners / viewers. Education is key, especially for the HR department, which we talked about. The livelihood of an employee is so often in the hands of HR, so HR needs to be well versed in an issue that is not always easy to pinpoint or even understand. And we've talked about this, so that's where you come in. If they only have educational tools in place and have the full backing of the organization to take a stand against bullying, then they can be successful. So, and is it a top-down situation? I know you work with HR departments in particular, but is it talk to me about how important it is to have management buy-in into these type of programs?
It's so critical. Truly, HR can only do so much, because if you don't have buy-in from the top down, I don't want to give up on companies that don't have buy-in from the top down. I want to give HR teams the tools that they need, but they can only be so effective. And in many cases, they become the tool of the top management, who, if they have a command and control approach to management, to running their businesses, you're not going to have much success. But it is good to understand the phenomenon regardless.
Absolutely. So Leslie, this is your opportunity. My favorite phrase when I do my LinkedIn presentations is, all you got to do is to connect with me and say my presentation rocked, which, by the way, you have, as usual. But take a minute, if folks are interested in getting in contact with you, first of all, who are you interested in connecting with? And again, a softball, and we really didn't talk much about targets, but also, what services you provide and how they can start that conversation.
So the easiest way to get in touch with me is to I'll make it really simple. Just go to my website. It's leslieaugust.com, LESLIE, August like the month. So the traditional spelling of Leslie, August.com. And just go in there and either go to contact us. Actually, that's the easiest way. Go to contact us and just send me a message through contact us. You can mention Chuck Hester. And if you've got questions or you just want to be on the mailing list, tell me what you want. If you just want to do a free, consultation, run a situation by me, I am more than happy to talk to anybody who has an interest in learning more, wants to know what they can do in their organization, or even if you or somebody you know is being targeted and you want to know how to get help, I will direct you to, I think the best place to start is the Workplace Bullying Institute. And my partner, Gary Namey at the Workplace Bullying Institute. But you don't have to remember that. Just get to me and I'll help direct you to where you need to go. And if you really do need support as a bullied target, I have some resources that are online resources where you can talk to a trauma-informed therapist, which is what you want to do. So if you're looking for somebody to help you on the psychology side, you want to look for a trauma-informed therapist, somebody who understands what is entailed when you've been bullied, like some people are in the workplace.
Leslie, as usual, it's always been a pleasure to talk with you. The comments that are coming in are, that this is something that needs to be talked about, and it's not talked about enough. So I greatly appreciate you taking the time. And like I said, it works around social media and communications, perfect for what we are, conversations with Chuck Hester. So I greatly appreciate the time that you've taken today. We'll close up the show in a couple of minutes here, but I greatly appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Chuck, I'd like to offer your audience a free resource.
Okay.
And again, they just go to my website, and there's a free gift that I have. There's one for employers, and there's one for employees or targets. But I don't want to have to tell you how to navigate to find that. Just go to my website, send me a contact us, and I will send you the link so that you can get that free resource. It's everything from calculating the costs of workplace bullying. I have actual online worksheet for employers as well as employees that they can use. It's additional resources. It's a checklist to determine whether or not you have been the target of workplace bullying. So there's 3 or 4 different resources within each area for the employer and the employee that I'm happy to offer your listeners.
I greatly appreciate that, Leslie. And again, thank you for your time today. And I'm sure folks will be reaching out to you as well. So thanks again.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Absolutely.
Always great to spend time with you.
Yeah. So this was Conversations with Chuck Hester. We are on a weekly basis these days. So, and actually we are going all the way through the last episode of the year will be on the 30th, but the episode before Christmas is going to be on the 23rd. So you get a chance to be able to do that. And I want to take 2 seconds and thank my sponsor, Vidyard. They're the folks that can help you with video for your business. Just go to vidyard.com/free, and you can get a chance to take a look and see what they have to offer. And so next week's guest is also about workplace culture. She's a workplace culture expert. Her name is Shannon McCain. She's motivated audience to make changes for the better in their personal and professional lives. And she's also a Kansas City Chiefs fan, and for a good reason. She's a former Kansas City Chiefs cheerleader. Shannon is an amazing speaker and someone I'm definitely looking forward to talking to. So please feel free to share this podcast with your friends and connections. The replay will be posting soon on Facebook and YouTube. I've also set up Anchor.fm. The audio podcast is now available as well on Google Podcasts, Spotify, and many other channels. And a gift for you, if you're interested in learning how you can improve your marketing or LinkedIn presence, like Leslie August has done, contact me on LinkedIn, mention this podcast, and I'll put together a free 15-minute discovery call. So that's it for this week. Until next time, this is Chuck Hester reminding you to stay well, stay connected, and always pay it forward.